how cold weather clothing has changed for us on the ranch. That's today's episode of In the Chute. Cold weather clothing, cold weather. It's inevitable this time of year. What are some of the things that have changed since you've been a kid to now? And I'll kind of share some of the things I've noticed. It used to be, I'll just be personal about it. It used to be, hey, kid, get in the overalls, get in the snow pants, and go outside. That's kind of how it was. But we always had good clothing. I know you didn't always have good clothing growing up. So how much has that kind of changed? Well, you've gone from being a kid to where you are now.
That's a huge change. And I think I always wanted you and your brother to have really good cold weather
Yeah.
gear because I I it hurt when I was a kid. I mean, it was no fun at all. And it's amazing that we didn't frostbite more. For instance, I grew up pretty damn poor, way poor, very poor. And like a lot of people, we're not the only ones, but and there's going to be a lot of people my age that will remember sticking bread sacks over your socks and putting those in your boots to try to keep the moisture away. And really, I mean, it kind of helped, but it was cold enough that your feet didn't sweat, in those bread
Yeah.
sacks, but it was just a barrier. And I don't think it worked all that well, but it was something you did. We did having a pair of overshoes that was a decent pair of overshoes was a luxury. And so it just was something that we just fought with. And you go out and work all day in that, or especially ride. If you're riding, and when it's cold enough that those cows, when they step and they can hear the cloven hoof, those click together, and I mean make a now loud like a snapping sound, that air is cold, and you get to where your feet just ache, and then you can't feel them, and you're kind of feeling it ache up your ankles, and you're trying to wiggle your toes, and they're just like blocks, and it hurts. It's painful. So, getting a little older, getting a decent job, and the first time I had decent footwear, honestly, was when I went to work for the state after I graduated from college, and I got a pair of Schnees boots, snow boots, and I couldn't believe my feet were warm. I mean, I was like giddy. My
Yeah.
feet were actually warm in bitter cold temperatures. So, you learn, and you can bundle up. The rest of you used to wear, we always had insulated underwear, like pull-on, long john type stuff, only sometimes they're really thick, heavy quilted insulated stuff if you were really out there in the cold. They don't even build that stuff anymore that I know. Maybe they do. I don't know.
A lot of it's
Something's going
we
to come
call them,
around.
well, in my neck of the industry, we call them ninja suits, but they're more like lightweight, almost like Under Armour material,
Okay.
and it's more microfiber and stuff like that. You put a top and a
Yeah.
it's long johns, but it's just microfiber stuff.
Yeah, no, these were kind of had a fill to them, and they were like
Yeah.
they had the quilting, around them, and so they were kind of fluffy, kind of puffy.
Right.
Uh, long johns, and you could put a shirt or overshirt type on, and then like anything else, which is really no different today. We got some better materials now. I shouldn't say that, because you know what, some of the best thing you can wear is wool, and wool's been
Oh,
around for centuries.
absolutely.
That is the absolute best. But you don't put wool on your feet
No.
outside of socks, wool socks, but you got to have a little bit bigger boot to put that in to keep your foot warm. And not that I don't, because those schnees that I'm still wearing schnees in the wintertime. I mean, that's been 30 some years ago since I bought my first pair of schnees, but oh my gosh, just the sheer comfort of having your feet not hurt. They'll get
Yeah.
cold, you're out there long enough, but to not hurt, to not ache is a big deal. Um, Layering the rest of your body, with under clothing, and then I still wear like Wranglers, most of the time I just have a set of Wranglers on. I don't even have any long underwear on in the wintertime. And having maybe a Carhartt coat or even Carhartt bibs, or full coveralls. If it's really cold, I'll put those on, but it's got to be pretty dang cold. I don't mind the cold so much, or I'm, always grew up used to it. But having those on in the wind, that's a nice feature to have. So, and then for your head, I always wear a felt hat, and it's got to be pretty dang cold before I'll take it off. When I have a rabbit skin, like a bomber hat on, when I'm wearing that, it's cold, because I don't like to not wear my hat. So, gloves, you go through lots of gloves. The old monkey face, unless it's a snowmobile type glove, if you're not
Yeah.
doing any hard work where you're going to tear them up, I'll put those on. But to do just normal work, it's, just those yellow monkey, we always call them monkey face gloves, and have several sets of them because they're going to get wet. They go on the dash. The heater's trying to warm them up and dry them off, or down on the floorboard, and you're swapping those out 3 or 4 pair a day if you have to.
I know it happened last year during the Arctic blast where you and I we had to get bundled up a little bit. And then it got bad enough that we actually had to cover our mouths so we didn't freeze our lungs, which people may
Yeah.
have thought that's a little over the top, but it wasn't. It was
No,
actually a thing.
yeah.
The the thing that you brought up was the fact that normally you just wear your Wranglers and a Carhartt jacket. I was gonna say for me, I normally have the Carhartt pants. I got the double fronts, but they're essentially the same thickness, other than that one spot as the Wranglers. And then I have a long tee, which I pretty much 90% of the time you'll see me wear a long tee, summer or winter. And then I have a sweatshirt with a vest over the top of that, and that's it. And people will be like, "Well, that's not a lot." And like, yeah, but if you're moving around, that's all you
Yeah.
need. Sometimes I get rid of that vest too because it gets a little warm. You got to
Yeah.
be careful.
Well, and that's what you do too. You pace yourself in the wintertime. You try
Yeah,
not to sweat, because if you
yeah.
get sweaty and wet, or then you'll get cold. But yeah, I'll put on a vest, a wool vest underneath of my Carhartt, and that's it, generally. But if if we're working and need to do some real physical labor, you just kind of slow it down a little bit
Yeah.
and kind of pace yourself so you're not sweating, and which is kind of counterintuitive because you got to get work done, but it just takes a little bit longer to do it. Getting wet is a kiss of death in the wintertime here. You can, get hypothermic pretty easy doing that.
Have you seen the improvement of technology since you were even out of college and getting a time with the state? The improvement of technology for cold weather gear from then to now.
Oh, it's incredible. Gore-Tex was
Yeah.
like and I think it still is. I mean, it's just amazing how some of these materials wick moisture away, and most of them are doing that. They're wicking it away again to keep you dry. You can take a lot of cold if you're dry. If you're
Yeah.
wet, you can't take much at all before it affects you. That wind chill really gets to you. Yeah, that Gore-Tex is probably one of the biggest ones. And some of the blends, and I don't know, I'm sure they're doing all kinds of stuff that I can't afford or don't think I can afford, because I guess I'm warm enough.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that's probably a good insight right there because if anybody knows, I read a lot and I actually there's a great book called Not a Good Day to Die, and it's about Operation Anaconda in early 2003 when they tried to capture Osama bin Laden in the mountains of Afghanistan. And it was one of the first times that current special forces got involved with really cold weather like they had in the mountains in the Hindu Kush. And they said Gore-Tex is exactly what happened. They used Gore-Tex, and it was exactly what you just said. They said you will be cold and it's not going to be fun, but they learned a valuable lesson in that operation, which was it keeps everybody dry. Being able to just keep yourself dry was 75% of the battle. They said if they needed to, they could move around and they could try and warm up, but just staying dry is a big thing. I think that's important for ranching and farming too, especially when it comes to you're dealing with water and everything. Just if you have technology that kind of if you get water on you, but it keeps you dry still, like I think that's definitely a win.
Yeah, and we've done things where we can afford to do it. Uh, and by that, I don't mean monetarily. I mean that you have the ability to kind of, we'll say you're clearing water out. You can take your hand out of a glove,
Yeah.
and you can get your hand wet. You can be moving ice around and scooping ice, and you can get your hand wet, stick it back in that glove. It's kind of dry, but you're not going to be in it very long. And then you're going to be changing those gloves out, in another 10, 15 minutes or so. Once that task is up. And so you can afford to be a little sloppy here. You can't do that when you're a soldier. That's a no risk type of thing that you need to take. But one of the biggest things is not being restrictive on your feet.
Oh
You
yeah.
got to have those boots big enough so that you can move in them. That's part of it. And I think that was as a kid was part of it too, that when you put bread sacks are thin, but they still bunch up. Every time you try to put on something warmer, like a heavier pair of socks, you're just constricting your feet. And that, in hindsight, that was not probably the thing to do. Doing the best you can, but you're just using your everyday boots. Same thing with your with gloves. I've doubled up on gloves, put a thin brown jersey gloves inside of a monkey face glove, and as long as it's loose, you're okay. But if you start, constricting that blood flow, that's a bad thing too. You'll slow things down and you'll get cold.
Yeah, especially because ultimately that's what the cold does anyway.
Right.
It restricts that blood flow. So doing it to yourself before that even happens isn't a good thing.
Right.
But yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad the weather gear has
Me
improved since
too.
I've gotten here because I'm a wimp when it comes to the cold. So
Yeah, you
I
can't take
appreciate it.
much of it. Your brother and I are much better at it than you are.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
think you might
yes,
not even
definitely.
be as good as your mother at it. So
That hurts.
yeah,
It's probably true, but it hurts.
you can't even take the cold like a girl can. So there.
All right, with that, we'll take that conversation and put it out to pasture.